council to order. Work session at 3 o'clock at the time and place is advertised. Next order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd please stand and join us in reciting our Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. We have Councilor Klein with us participating via remote today. You can hear us okay. And then Councilor Lidke has an excused absence. She may be able to join us here in just a short bit. Our next item of business is citizen comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to address the council on agenda items or other items they wish to bring to the attention of the council. Citizens are encouraged to discuss operational issues in advance with the mayor. In consideration of others wishing to speak, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Also, the City Council pledges to practice and promote civility within the governing body, advocating for civil engagement, respecting others and their viewpoints, and finding solutions for the betterment of the City of Lewiston. If you're here today to provide citizen comments, I would invite you up to the stand here. And above your head, you'll see 3 green circles. Those are the microphones in this room. I know it's hard. This is a terrible room. But when you come up, please project your voice, speak loudly, clearly, slowly, so those listening at home can hear what you have to say, and maybe those in the back of the room also. And then just give us your name and your place of residence, the town. We don't need your actual physical address. So if there's anybody here that would like to provide citizen comments, the time is now. Welcome, Bill.
Bill Firstanaw, 1011 Prospect Avenue. I know this isn't a formal hearing, but I've spoken before about 3 months ago when this item D, shipping containers, came up before the council, and I guess it had to be reworked or something. I was hoping the whole bizarre idea would be just kind of die a natural death, but I guess it hasn't. And so I just want to, again, I just see this as a move in the wrong direction. We're supposed to be cleaning up the town, not the other way around. I'll speak and write more about this later. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Welcome.
I'm Dick Riggs. I came to give my advice to the city council to keep the cemetery property that you're talking about selling. I was born in St. Joseph's Hospital, my wife and I, and we own our plots in our cemetery, and we have our stone already up. My grandparents were buried there, and my parents. And many friends and other family. I've written a little about cemeteries. This is last Saturday's Tribune in the Golden Times, visiting final resting places. I've written an article there about the cemeteries in Nez Perce County. And I've published 10 books of various articles on Lewiston history. And one of them is 600 plus lives remembered, obituaries and cemeteries. And one of the articles in the book is Normal Hill Cemetery. And I think it is a part of Lewiston's history. And my advice, don't sell the property all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dick.
Yeah.
Hi, Cindy Ball, Lewiston. At the August 5th council session, Tim Barker, then director for Parks and Rec, was tasked with pursuing public comment regarding the sale of the 2.2 acres adjacent to Southway Avenue. And looking at the the responses on the public inquiries is as depressing as our, 25% voters at the primary. There seems to be a lot of not care amongst our people. However, the council asked for voices. And what I would like to bring forward is the voices of 5 decades of city council members and volunteers for the city of Lewiston, serving on historic preservation committees, planning and zoning committees, and all other committees that people who have stepped forward to guide our community in growing in a way that not only honors where it came from in our past, but also carefully positioning it to move forward. In 1976, when the Historic Preservation Society was tasked with developing the Normal Hill area, it took 13 years and community input to come to terminology that our community could support. And in 2016, the zone codes specific to what had then been created, the Normal Hill Heritage Overlay, Normal Hill South, all of those codes were revisited and updated, specific to the intent of that area. So 5 decades of leadership, just as yourselves, moving that forward. One of the things that the survey that went out recently did not address is that this body presented it 2.2 acres to sell as commercial. That was not made very clear in the inquiries sent out to people to provide input. This is not commercial space, and it will never, well, let me rephrase, it was not intended to be commercial space moving forward. It was intended to be preserved and protected based on the historic nature, the architectural nature, and the general foundational start of our community. And by moving forward and seeking market evaluations for commercial, and most specifically per our mayor, commercial office, we are not a community that has a shortfall of commercial development areas. We are vastly moving east from Nez Perce Drive. We're moving north. We've got North Lewiston going into industry. There's plenty of commercial. And as far as offices are concerned, commercial offices, I'm going to say that we have such an abundance that they are now being asked to be rezoned so they can be developed into residentials. Throughout this entire process, we hear about budget and the sustainability of the Normal Hill Cemetery. If we look at LCSE, if we look at the old high school, we had leadership that failed to plan long-term for the needs. And in 2014 or 15, the cemetery was planning for future need by acquiring that property. So it is part of the director's job to come up with a way to support it sustainable, and it is also this council's job to help contribute by capital projects, moving it up on the ladder of things that need to be done. And so the fail of not moving it forward in the 9 years since it was adopted, it's on both parties. But I would implore this body to understand that to pursue a commercial use is to essentially put planning and zoning and other city leaders under fire for a presumed pre-approval for something that is not needed. We need space for our future loved ones. We need to preserve our history and our community history. And we don't need commercial offices or to encroach upon protected properties or cannibalize protected properties for commercial use. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sylvia.
Elizabeth Getzinger. Sorry about the knot on my head, but I fell when I was coming here, so we've got a big knot on our forehead. Did you need my address?
No, ma'am.
Okay. I am speaking as a private citizen, even though most of you know that I actually am on the Cemetery Commission. But I've lived on Normal Hill for 62 years. I'm a native Lewiston resident. I was born here. Both my children walked through the cemetery to school. They loved that cemetery, by the way. And they even took picnic lunches up there on weekends so they could sit in the cemetery and eat a lunch, which I packed for them. I first joined the Normal Hill Heritage Group with Kathy. It's how I even got started with the Normal Hill area. I became involved a few years ago to fight for the land that is south of the cemetery. And this land is needed for future generations of Lewiston. You do understand, this is our only city cemetery. The other cemetery we have in the area is privately owned. And I thought this land was given to the cemetery a few years ago. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was. And I'd like to know exactly when it was taken back. You know, a master plan was developed on this land for this whole land. That master plan cost a lot of money for us to have developed. And it's a shame that we can't go forward and use it the way it should be used. We've asked for money to develop certain areas in that cemetery, but mostly we're not given it. And as a private citizen, I'm appalled that you would consider our future Lewiston citizens aren't deserved of a beautiful spot for their final resting place. There are more than other pieces of surplus land in Lewiston. If you really need the money, you can sell it. And the one I'm thinking of most is the one up on 5th and Brighton, where we have these beautiful redwood trees. That is the best commercial property I think we have as surplus land. And nobody else would want to put anything in there besides something that would go with the businesses that are already there. And as a private citizen, use some other land to generate your funds that you need. Leave the cemetery land alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council members. I'm Tammy Myers, and I reside in Lewiston. I'm actually here as a property owner of Main Street property, and I want to express my cautious excitement for the Reimagine Downtown Lewiston rebuild project. While the scale of this project might seem daunting, I do recognize the need for replacing our aging infrastructure. If we delay that, it could become very costly, risking that continuous cycle of patchwork repairs as we go along. That would disrupt businesses and strain taxpayer dollars more excessively than a project that's all-inclusive. This project is an opportunity to address all the necessary upgrades at once and implement long-term improvements that will enhance our downtown for years to come. By investing in an inclusive rebuild, we can create a safer, more vibrant downtown that will support our community as we move forward. So I want to thank you for considering the project's potential to make a lasting positive impact on our city.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Dan Mader, and I'm just here to speak to the Downtown Reimagine or Rebuild project. I've been in a lot of meetings. I say a lot, probably 4, and maybe zoomed into another 1 or 2 about the project. And you know, it's one of those projects that you kind of like grit your teeth and kind of wish you didn't have to go through, because we all know in the downtown that it's going to be relatively long and kind of painful. Nevertheless, because of the age of the infrastructure, number one, and because of the capacity of it, we're basically at capacity, there's just no way around it. It's time to do it. And in the meetings that I've been in, even though we all know it's going to be a little difficult to get through this, there's been generally pretty strong support from the people in town who are going to be the most affected by this project, meaning the downtown property owners and the downtown businesses. And I spoke a couple times with Mark Alexander about some of his developments, and at least in his mind, for the projects that he would like to do that are economically viable, and some of them are kind of marginal, there's a couple projects that he can't do because of the capacity of the infrastructure. So I think he's pretty supportive. I think you've already received that, but I just want to add my voice to that. I've been a downtown property owner since 1979, which now is a long time ago. I also recall as a little child, I was probably 6 or 7 years old, coming to Lewiston, and the downtown was where we all went, especially at Christmas time, to do Christmas shopping and things like that. And then we went through a phase where everybody wanted to get out of downtown and they were all headed to the malls. And I lived through that phase, and thank God that phase is over. The malls are dying, and now everybody wants to come back to downtown. They really do. They love the downtowns no matter where you go. I just came from Bellevue, Washington, and heard the mayor of Bellevue, Washington talk about surveys where over 75% of the people in Bellevue love the downtown Bellevue. So the point of it is, this is where it's going to be. This is sort of the meeting place of downtown Lewiston. When we get the infrastructure rebuilt, which is a relatively easy decision because we can pay for the bonding, hopefully within our current tax revenues, we won't have to raise taxes. So even though it's going to be tough, it's time to do it, and I support it, and I hear a lot of support around me. So thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
I want to recognize Councilor Litkey at this time also. She's joined us remotely. Councilor, welcome.
I'm Tobe Finch with Happy Day Restaurants, and I'm also here to speak on behalf of the Reimagine Downtown. We have 2 restaurants downtown, our corporate office is downtown. To Dan's point, it's not really too exciting to see all this construction in front of your restaurants. We've had a lot of construction in front of most of our restaurants over these last couple of years, but I can't imagine what it will be like if we don't. Like, I'm okay with the pain to go through for what I see. I have been reimagining. I'm sitting on the advisory, in the advisory meetings, and it's beautiful. The plans that have been talked about, I've got a great vision of what that's going to look like and the life that it would bring to our community, to the people that come from Highway 12 that discover this cool downtown. They go, oh, wow, what is here? And in the space that is inviting and says, there's something new happening. There's new life that's coming to our community. So I wanted to give my voice that I'm in favor of it as a downtown business person, and would urge your support as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Howdy, I'm Bob Clavey, I live on 16th Avenue. About the cemetery, I just think it's morally wrong to even consider selling the property for anything, using it for anything except its purpose is originally for the cemetery, because after all, where are the people going to be put to rest for today's children so they can go and visit their graves? I'm just totally against selling the cemetery property. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, sorry. Mr. Mayor and I ref football together, so. Dennis Hastings from Vassar Rawls Funeral Home and Malcolm's Brower Wan Funeral Home, and I just wanted to stand this afternoon and lend my support to continued development of the cemetery and not selling the portion of it. I understand a lot of the concerns. I served on the cemetery commission when we first moved back to the valley for several years, and have been intimately involved in all the cemeteries and the valley and all aspects that take place there, and have had many, many, many conversations with many people about the cemetery and its use and what would be best for it. And so I just want to continue to advocate for the continued development of that property for cemetery use. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
Other comments?
Lewiston, Idaho, and I wanted to comment on the use of storage containers throughout the city. I think it's a bad decision. There's a lot of people that are gonna maybe build a fence around them, take care of them, paint pretty things on the side of them and use them for storage, and it's convenient. But that's gonna be a small percentage. I think a lot of them are going to drop them on a couple of 4x4s, run electrical out there without anything conforming to city code, and pretty much not take care of them. They're gonna be an eyesore. I think they're gonna bring down property values, which is something we need to be concerned about. I hate to tell somebody no, that they can't do something on their property, because I don't like being told no when I wanna do something on mine. But there's options to this moving forward. There's several businesses, Ziggy is one of them, that sell storage sheds that look decent, have siding on them, have roofing on them. They can hire private contractors to build a shed designed the way that they want to build them. I just don't think we want a portion to say, well, they're okay in the orchards, but they're not okay downtown. It's gonna be somewhat of a nightmare to follow the city code, enforce the city code, and make sure that they're safe. And I'd rather we just not have a lot of our residential zones look like a shipping yard. So I'd ask that you take that into consideration and have people think of other ways to make a nice, decent storage shed that keep our city looking presentable. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.
Penny Barbie, Lewiston. I live off 21st Street. I have 2 or 3 shipping containers on one piece of property about 2 blocks from my house. It looks terrible. They're not maintained. I don't believe they're code right now. And there they sit, and nobody does anything about it. And I don't think we need to add any more. I think we need the ones that are here gone. How do you expect to keep the value of your neighborhoods if those kind of things are sitting there? Nobody wants to live next to those. Thank you.
Thank you, Penny. Okay, any more citizen comments? So thank you, everyone, for coming forward. It's what our government's about, so we really appreciate you being here today. Our next item is Roman numeral 4, discussion items. Please note that identifying an item as an action item does not require the city council to vote on that item. Item A is Police Retirement and Perpetual Care Fund. An update on the Police Retirement and Perpetual Care Funds from Senior Portfolio Manager Jeff Trudeau of U.S. Bank. Jeff, can you hear us today?
Yes, I can. Yep.
Jeff, I'm going to turn the floor over to you. Just please introduce yourself and remember to speak up clearly and slowly so the others listening online can hear what you have to say. Welcome.
You got it. I'll defer to Jenny Hogaboom, the relationship manager for the city, to give a brief intro.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, City Council. We appreciate you offering for us to come speak in relationship to the police retirement plan and the perpetual care account. I'm the relationship manager located out of Boise. I have a long history in Idaho. And we're excited to be here. And Jeff is the primarily portfolio manager, and he manages the portfolios. So I'll turn it over to Jeff for the essence of time. How much time do we have, City Council? I mean, I can cut him short or,
Well, why don't we try 15 minutes, see if we can get through that.
You got it.
Okay. You're a fire drill, Jeff. Go take it away.
All right, I'm up. I've been prepping for this meeting, and I'm a little embarrassed about how much I enjoyed going through the process of seeing how much is in the pension fund and then all the variables that affect whether it's considered fully funded or not. And so why don't I just give a brief intro as to just how pension funds work, and you probably already know it, but it is comforting going into it knowing what the variables are. So to give you an idea here, the police pension fund is where I'll start. It has about $14 million in it. Well, that sounds good, but the question is that enough? And you ask yourself, well, how do you know? And that is the right question. How do you know? Well, knowing something is, you've got to make assumptions here as to how things are going to be going forward. Is it going to, we've got $14 million. What is our rate of return going to be? That's something that we have to assume. What's our assumed rate of return? How long are the pensioners and their survivors going to survive? I would just assume they all live to 100, but statistically, that's not likely to happen. So we guess as to why we use actuarial tables to guess how long they're going to live. And then also there's cost of living adjustments. Each year, the payments to the pensioners and their survivors may go up. We've got to account for or assume how much those payments are going to go up on cost of living adjustments and include that. So those are your main variables. How much do we have? And then let's make these assumptions as to what we need, and we revisit those variables every couple of years. So what I'll be doing is I'll be giving our performance numbers through the end of September, which is when Milliman, the actuarial company, they'll be running every 2 years, they'll run their computations and see how we're doing. What I've been entrusted to do in the bank is manage the funds that are here. Our target rate of return is 5.8%. They're saying, okay, all else being equal, if we do better than that, then we're better off. We have more funding, which makes sense. You're making more money. And if we're under that, well, we'll be underfunded. And then you're looking at the other variables as well to come up with that funding status. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the roles here and then how we're coming up to see if we have enough money or not. So I am going to bring up our account. Okay, can you all see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right, this is the account value for the pension. And again, I will touch on the perpetual care, but it's very, very similar to the pension, so you can reach information out of that. This is the value through the end of September. The total portfolio value was right about $14 million. Again, do we know if that's good or bad? Well, the most recent review that Milliman, the actuary, said in 2022, which in 2022, we were fully funded. We did not have an underfunding. We had slight excess, about $146,000 based on all these assumptions. Milliman said, okay, at the end of September 24, we expect the investment account to be about $11,306,000. Well, you can see we have done much, much better than that. We are closer to $14 million. So our portion of the assumptions, we have far exceeded it. So to give you an idea, if we were expected to return 5.8%, our 2-year average performance is up over 17%, net of all fees. So in the 2 years prior, from 20 to 22, that wasn't the case. 22 was a terrible year for both bonds and for stocks. And, we underperformed during that period, yet we were still fully funded. These, from October of 22 through the end of September of 24, you can see that we performed at 17.25% versus the 5.8. So that is very good news for the pensioners, that we've built this cushion. Now, other variables can come in. Mortality may be extending, which I mentioned, that's great. but other than for the pension contribution. The cost of living adjustments may be higher because, as we all know that the cost of living has gone up in the last 2 years. So those are some variables which may increase the need for money, but the performance is there. We have the money by exceeding by what's that? $2.7 million. Any questions so far?
I don't see any,
Okay.
Jeff. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just be brief on how we've done it and what we see going forward. We've done it, and I do look at Percy and see how they invest, so I can make some comparisons there if anybody wants to, but with 15 minutes, I'll just share that Percy is much more internationally focused, and I have not been internationally focused at all. I've been heavy domestic, heavier than Percy, and that's been a tailwind, honestly. We've done very well because that category has done the best. We're mostly large cap domestic companies. We have a significant amount of investment grade corporate bonds. Our rating is A rated on average. We have a blend of treasuries and corporate bonds. That makes up predominantly most of our investments. My responsibility is also to produce cash. Right now, we're producing about $91,000 a month. We need that much for the payments to the pensioners, or about 1.1 million a year. I've got to have the money there, and so I've got some shorter maturities that are funding those monthly outflows. I like to keep a balance in the money market account, and then have all of these bonds just maturing as we need the cash over time. So my job is to make sure the cash is there for those monthly outflows. Our stocks, like I said, are very not conservative, but the biggest and the best of the country. You'll recognize all these names. These are our biggest ones: Apple, Microsoft, NVIDIA, Oracle, a lot of tech up there, but we also have some defense companies, some healthcare companies. Micron is in there as well. So our large companies are reflective of the S&P 500, or the largest in the country. So we're participating in the moves of those companies. The next step we have here is that we're so heavily, and I'm going to wait until I see December's actuary report, but let's just assume we're going to be in the money by that 2.6 million in excess. What do we do? Do we stay where we are and let the good times continue, continue to build, or do we get more defensive and make sure that money is there? I think we get more defensive. I think we start bringing down the equities and increasing our more conservative investments. And the reason is that now we're getting interest on our bonds. If you notice from the late 2000s all the way up through 2022, interest rates were essentially zero. That's not the case. We can lock in now anywhere from 4.5% to 5%, going out anywhere from 5 to 15 years. That's pretty close to our target rate of 5.8%. So we'll still need equities. I do believe in a balance of risks. You've got to have stock, you got to have bonds. But I think in this scenario, how we run these pension funds, it's time to bring down the equity and bring down the risk because we do have such a cushion there. So look for what we are now at about 60% equities, 40% fixed income. Look for that to become closer to 50-50, and we lock in those rates and take some risk off the table for the benefit of the pensioners. I won't. Any questions about that? Because that's a pretty good summary of where we are. If I leave the council with anything, and the pensioners, we're doing very well. We'll look and see how the other assumptions are playing out in December. I'll manage to those as well. But we've created a good cushion, and I compliment the board and having to help fund this and keep it going when we were underfunded for a long period of time. That pendulum has swung, and we've got a pretty good cushion there.
Jeff, does the investment policy statement allow for the 50-50, or do we have to update that?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it lets me go down to 50-50. I believe it'll even allow me to go down to 30-70. But I think 50-50 is as neutral as I want to get. And part of the reason is that what if? And if that what if is that if rates come down to 1% again, and I've got $14 million earning 1%, I'm way far behind, and I don't want to get into that situation. I think this 50-50 for now is a good balance, and the bank does feel strongly, even though the market has had a pretty good rally. We feel that earnings are holding up mostly, and we're just barely over what they would consider reasonably priced for stocks as a group. And then that tailwind of falling interest rates and slowing inflation and practically fully a full labor force working. Those are all reasons for optimism to stay in equities. I did have one thing. This is really important. I know it's only 15 minutes, but that was a sturgeon we caught about a month ago down at Heller Bar. So that was really important. I felt the need to share that with the city.
Put a smile on everybody's face, Dennis. I would like to recognize Alan Johnson today, and maybe if he could just come up and introduce himself to the council again, and just explain what his role is, so we all understand what the connection is here locally between our retired law enforcement and U.S. Bank. So Alan, please welcome.
Good afternoon. My name's Alan Johnson, Lewiston Police, retirement on the old system. I sit on the retirement board and participate with the council in managing or suggestions during this retirement process. And it does sound like we're doing rather well. So I congratulate U.S. Bank, and hopefully it continues.
Thank you. Council, any questions for either Jeff or Alan or?
Mayor.
Oh, Councilor Forsman?
My only, not question, but request is that we have this packet sent to the city clerk so she can forward it on to the council. It really helps when we have these documents to look at on our computers because it's a little small on the TV. So that would have been helpful to have in the future. Thank you.
You got it.
Thank you. Jennifer, any parting comments for us?
We appreciate your business, and hopefully, the markets will stay up, and we'll see what happens tomorrow, and life moves forward.
Thank you, Jeff.
All right.
Jeff, any parting comments for us? No?
I would love to hear from the pensioners if they would like that. I'm always open for conversations with city councilmen. I want to make sure that everything we own, if I'm questioned about it, we have a purpose for owning it. And so I'd love to hear from everybody involved if they feel the need.
All right. Thank you very much for your time, your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet. Take care, everyone.
Okay, council, next up we have Main Street Corridor Project number B. And
They have the perpetual care fund as well. They might have disconnected. And they're.
Well, we'll get the
Yeah.
1 second. Director Gordon, help me here.
Well, I believe they already disconnected, but they were also going to present on the perpetual care fund because they manage both of those fiduciary funds.
Did they know that and I cut them off?
Yeah, they knew that.
All right, can we call them back?
I don't know about that. I doubt that.
When we get the presentation, we'll just have to make sure that they give us the cemetery one too, perpetual care fund.
Okay. Wow. My apologies. Call us back in. Okay, if not, councilors, we'll move to Main Street Corridor Project, an update on the Main Street Reimagine Downtown Lewiston project from project consultant Welch Coleman Associates. Incorporate this as an action item, and our Public Works Director Johnson is with us here today. Welcome, Director.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Dustin Johnson, Public Works Director. In the interest of time, I'll just give you a quick introduction. Generally, We are fast approaching kind of the wrap up on the design and input component of the Main Street design project. So we will be approaching the second public meeting here. Phil will walk us through the schedule, but I just want to reach out to the council, the public. If you want to participate and have input on the design, it is way easier on the front end rather than to wait and play Monday morning quarterback and tell us about what we should have designed. It's a lot easier to fix it now while we're designing it. So as we've already received a little bit of public comment just today, I think enthusiasm is building. The city purposely took this project knowing how impactful it will be to Lewiston. It's a once in a generation opportunity to rebuild your Main Street. And typically engineering projects are, you're making sausage behind the scenes and it's pretty boring, but this has been engaging and exciting to work with the impacted property owners, the business owners, and people who just want to see downtown thrive. So I will hand it off to Phil, who will provide you basically the last update before we're ready to roll out something more formal. So here's Phil from Welch-Comer.
Thanks, Destin. Thanks, Mayor, council members, for having me. As usual, I have a presentation, and Mayor, I'm glad to take questions as we move along. If the council members have questions, feel free to stop me and I'll do my best to answer them. As Destin said, we're kind of reaching to the bottom of the funnel. You see here we're at November 4th. This is our city council update. Our next meeting will be a general public meeting, so a lot of the content that you're going to see now would be what we would present at the general public meeting. The purpose of showing you some of it now is in the event you said, gosh, we don't want to do that. We obviously don't want to show it to the general public kind of in a formal way until you all have had an opportunity to see it. Once we get through the general public meeting and their final bit of feedback, we'll finalize our concept design, the cost estimate. We'll bring it back to the council in November, and then potentially it moves forward to a general obligation bond in May of 25. So that is our schedule. Just refreshing the council members where the boundaries of the project are. You can see here shown in yellow are the project boundaries. For the most part, a big portion of that is Main Street, which is a complete reconstruct, building face to building face. Other portions of the project are partial reconstructs because they're just primarily associated with water, sewer, utility replacements. So one of the things we've been presenting to the general public is why one big project? Because the concept of, there's kind of two ways to do this. You can proceed like you have been proceeding, which is reactive, and as things happen, you go and repair them. Or you can go in and replace portions of the utilities one at a time. So kind of a cut and patch methodology. And I think just common sense prevails a little bit when you think about cutting and patching. That's not very efficient. So doing one big project is very cost efficient, and in addition to that, it's less disruptive than doing multiple projects. And I'll show you some exhibits coming up and some financial exhibits as well that demonstrate that. The other big component here that we have dug into and shed a light on is two pieces of infrastructure in downtown. They're two parts of the sewer system are very critical for serving a big majority of Lewiston, and I'll show you an exhibit in a second. And then the arterial plan, the city council has identified that Main Street is your #1 arterial project. You have a number of arterials that you plan to do work on, but Main Street was your first one. So if you take kind of this critical piece of infrastructure and the arterial improvement project as being your #1, you put them together, it's one big project is what makes sense, just from a pragmatic standpoint on way to get things done. This exhibit shows the amount of the Lewiston sewer that flows through downtown. The yellow portion flows through the sewer main on First Street, and the purple area flows through a portion of the sewer main on Main Street. So those critical pieces of infrastructure need either some level of maintenance or replacement in order to continue to serve that group of Lewiston. So this is kind of a demonstration of how critical those elements of infrastructure are. These exhibits are intended to communicate the kind of the pragmatic approach to tearing up your, any street, but in this case, Main Street. You can see the sewer, water, and storms that are, utilities that are demonstrated there. And this is both what's running down Main Street and then the services that go out. And you'll note the colors. You'll see that the sewer is very deep. And so by the time you dig down, and the reason it's very vertical coming out of that very deep sewer, it's about 17 feet deep, is because there'll be trench boxes that support the trench. But then once you get up, the ditch will splay back. You know, that's what that lateral splay you see in there. On all three of those utilities, and you kind of look at this and say, well, it kind of looks like it's isolated just to the road, but you have the laterals to replace as well because those are old. And so by the time you look at the laterals, this is that same exhibit where that's shown in plan view, those same colors. You can see them on Main Street going down the street, and then you see them laterally. And really what happens is you turn the surface into kind of Swiss cheese because you're tearing up so much of the surface improvements. At that point, it's not cost efficient to patch back when you tear the surface improvements up like that. It just makes sense to tear them all out and then put them all back in one fell swoop. And so that's why you commonly see if you're going to do this much infrastructure replacement, you just tear out all the surface improvements and replace them all at the same time. By doing that, you do have the opportunity to dress them up a little bit, and there is a component of dressing the downtown up, and I'll show you some of those things here in a second. But if there's any questions at this point about the thought of replacing the infrastructure.
Councilors, Councilor Klein or Litke, questions for the presenter? Not at this time?
I do.
Oh, Councilor Forsman?
Don't look so excited.
Huh?
I said, don't look so excited. Just kidding. What was the response? I think I saw, unless I misunderstood it, but what was the response on creating a two-way street?
I'll show you that here in just a second.
Okay, I'm jumping ahead.
Yep,
All
no,
right, I'll
that's
wait.
fine. It's an important topic. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll wait.
Okay. So here's the kind of the financial component example, because you can go do the project in one big fell swoop, or you can do it in, let's call it the cut and patch method, say over 4 separate projects over 20 years. This is just a hypothetical illustration, so don't get attached to the $20 million. And I'm always careful about throwing numbers out like this, because at some point, if we get down the road further, someone's going to say, well, wait a second, you said that was $20 million. No, it's just a hypothetical examples for illustration purposes. So the two options are build it soon or build it over 4 separate projects over 20 years. And I'll use a little graph to demonstrate that. So think of it as building your house. You're going to go spend $20 million, let's say in 2025. You're going to go borrow money from the bank to do that, and you got to pay your mortgage. And so in this illustration, the mortgage is $1.45 million a year. It's a very big mortgage, but it's a very big house. And you currently set aside about $1.8 million in your fund, in your street funds. So that number, 1.8, is bigger than 1.45. So in this illustration, you can afford your mortgage. This doesn't consider how much of the project cost you would fund with your enterprise funds. So water or sewer or storm. So that's an example if you were to go borrow the money and build. What sometimes folks say is, well, why don't we just save up money and we'll save and then we'll go do a project and then we'll save some more money and go do a project. So let's say you save for 5 years, you invest that money maybe in your U.S. bank fund and you get 5.8% interest, which is very good. The challenge is construction inflation is starting to outpace regular inflation because materials are part of it. Those have started to come down, but the labor force, I think as all of us are familiar with, the shortage of labor is really driving construction inflation. So when you look at this illustration in the purple, it shows you how much money you would have to save in the first 5 years each year to go do these projects over the time. And the reason that these numbers are so big here is because you're saving money in 2025 that you're gonna spend way out in 2045. You have to start saving that early to do this. And you can see how much higher those numbers are than your current street set aside. So hopefully this illustration makes sense that you couldn't really save and do this project because construction inflation will outpace your savings return on investment, if that, your interest savings that you can generate from a savings account. Okay. So moving on, as Dustin mentioned, we've done a substantial amount of public outreach. We have a steering committee that the mayor had put together with business and property owners and council people and general public. We've had an open house. There's a number of individual business surveys we've done. We've done a general property owner survey. That double X right there should be 41. Because we've done 41 stakeholder interviews, literally sitting down with property owners and business owners to get their direct feedback. And we've also had bi-weekly coordination meetings with the staff, with the city staff. So tons of input, which is great. That gives you a little bit of an illustration of the folks that we've talked to. Those shown in green there are the business or property owners that we've talked to. And then here's some of the results of the surveys that we had. This is from the general public survey that we thought would be a little bit more interesting. Because, if we survey, we have a property owner, business owner survey, which is very good too. But these are kind of some of the general observations we've seen. What would bring you to downtown more often? Because ultimately, one of the objectives is this project, in addition to replacing pre-World War I infrastructure, is to drive private investment downtown, because when you drive private investment, it raises property tax values, and good things come from that. Looking for better connectivity, better and more event spaces, and more shopping and restaurants. Probably not a gigantic surprise to folks. The connectivity part was a little bit interesting to us because it was both pedestrian and vehicle connectivity. And this goes back to the two-way street comment that we'll get to here in a second. Priorities for Main Street. Not too many folks said just leave it as it is. And this is, again, general public output or input. Business visibility was important, parking retention, destination amenities, space for sidewalk activation, where you can put your wares out on the street, or you can have cafe seating, and slower traffic speeds. We've talked a lot about that slower traffic speeds generate a more pedestrian-friendly environment. A more pedestrian-friendly environment generates better business. And what's downtown lacking? Outdoor usable space, parking, foot traffic, which is probably not a big surprise, and attractive sidewalks. This is just a summary, and I'm not going to go through these, but what we intend to do with this is when we hear something important, what are we doing about it? And so one of the things that we've heard is a little bit of confusion on two-way traffic, is why go to two-way traffic? And so I'll hit that here in a second. And so this is, again, just a summary of things that we've heard, and we like to show, what are we doing about it? Understanding the bond and financial information. I had presented that before in about 4 or 5 slides, and it was just too complicated. And so hopefully when I presented it this time, it made a little bit more sense, because there's a bunch of spreadsheet work behind that that I didn't show. So two-way traffic, here's the kind of the topic of two-way traffic. This is an example of the current condition here, where you have in the couplet, you have 2 vehicles, as you guys know. Let's say these vehicles are going eastbound, and you have a ped crossing here. When a pedestrian starts to come out, this car does not necessarily see that pedestrian because it's blocked by this car. And any of you that have wandered through downtown, you have this feeling intuitively. You get ready to cross and you pause. You've also noticed where the traffic's either, where they merge, and I witnessed it here today, a guy in a sports car must have been doing about 65 here as he was racing the truck that was next to him as they tore out of that intersection. And you guys see that happening. But generally, this type of traffic, when they're moving parallel to each other, it's very comfortable to speed because you don't have something coming at you. So there's two things that happen here. One is the pedestrian issue, but then just when you don't have traffic coming towards you, you have a tendency to go a little bit faster. So that is not a great configuration for promoting slower speeds, which makes a more comfortable pedestrian. Also, just the ease of access in downtowns, having two-way traffic is just better because it gives easier access for getting to shops and businesses along the corridor. And then the other big component is having two-way traffic on both Main and D Street allows you to close either one of them, but let's say close Main Street and you can put all the traffic onto D Street. So now you can have big events on Main Street, and events drive business revenue. Because when you bring people to downtown, they may not spend money on that day at the event, but they might become aware of a shop that they didn't know about or a restaurant that they didn't know about. Seems kind of strange, but it is, I can tell you from firsthand experience, that is true what happens. Sales might not go up exactly that day, but future sales generally follow. So I don't know if that captures the two-way traffic question completely.
Mine was more centralized. What's the businesses feel about it and public?
Yep, the response, we were a little bit surprised, but the response we've heard is very good. Once you explain it to people, they're like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, so it's been very positive. We'll show you some more here in a second about the roundabouts that are conceptualized up at First and coming off of the Blue Bridge, which again, we thought that there would be a little bit of hesitance to that, and there hasn't been. But yeah, it's been good feedback.
Awesome, thank you.
So this is a big overview, and we'll start to zoom in on some of them. And I'm going to move fairly quickly through these because there's a lot of slides, and we can always go back if need be, but I want to be respectful of your time. This shows, obviously, First Street. There's two roundabouts here coming off the Blue Bridge, Snake River Drive, D Street. There's another roundabout, and this is two-way traffic all the way to 11th, and then two-way traffic on D Street. Here's the roundabouts that are at the Blue Ridge is here off the left, Snake River Drive down here, First Street and Main Street. The beauty of this configuration, and I will tell you, our transportation team spent a ton of time modeling it, analyzing it, spending a lot of time talking to Luke and Dustin about it, and Shannon, and with their teams, and looking through to make sure that the configuration would function properly. And this, without getting way into the weeds, at 2045, so 20 years from next year, these two roundabouts, or actually all three of them, still operate at a level of service A and B, which is great. Here's one of the views of the roundabout if we're looking east. So there's the LC Hotel, and you can see the roundabouts there, and you can just move through them very freely. You guys have been in roundabouts. There's one being constructed on the west side, as you know. There's another view kind of at street level. It's designed to move the design vehicle, a highway design vehicle through it that can circulate through it. And then this is the existing condition, and we use this during the steering committee and public meetings to kind of demonstrate the increased efficiency if, let's say, you're trying to go westbound on the Blue Bridge. This shows one potential route where you come over here, go to 3rd Street, come back on D, go to First, and you wrap around. The other alternative obviously would go to the bypass off of Snake River Drive and come back onto D First and go that way. In the roundabout configuration, you could just take that green route that's shown in there. The red route is obviously you're going to go eastbound. And I'm just gonna click through these, but you can see how with two-way traffic, if you were headed westbound, that's the route. Whoops, if you're headed onto Snake River Drive and you're on Main Street, that's the route. There, if you wanna go back to D Street on First, if you're coming on First, that's an existing route a movement you can currently take. Here's another one that you wanna go westbound on Main. You're on First Street, you want to go to Snake River Drive. So you can see that these configurations, the two roundabouts here, provide a lot of flexibility of movements, and you're not stopped at a signal. And I think you all have experienced the situation where you get to a signal, even signals that have sensors on them, and you pull up and you stop and there's nobody else there, and you wait, and then eventually it gets through its cycle and allows you to move. With a roundabout, it just moves traffic very efficiently. Any questions on the roundabouts?
My only concern about one of them, I think it was a couple slides back, I think it was going over into Clarkston. Further back, there was like a big semi truck.
Oh, you want me to go back to one of the renderings?
Yeah, so that one, that's would be my only concern, is that people would not be good about stopping and then T-boning.
And so that's a really good observation. We spent a ton of time thinking about that. This vehicle, the white vehicle here that looks like an Audi, they actually have the right of way. This truck does not have the right of way. And there was a fair amount of time spent in making sure there's enough length. Let me see if I can show you. This probably shows it, that there's enough length in here that you can see that vehicle coming in. So we kept pushing these roundabouts further apart. So as you're coming this way, and let's say you're going to Snake River Drive, you're gonna go turn left that way. And you're gonna have to stop right there, but you have enough sight distance to see that car coming. Yeah, and that's a very good observation, and our transportation people spent a bunch of time looking at that and trying to make sure that we're achieving the proper design spaces and whatnot that go into that. I'm gonna click through these very quickly. Oops. Okay, so now I'm just gonna kind of walk you through, and again, I'll be fairly brisk on the pace here, but I'm glad to go back. I'm gonna start at Main Street, or right here at First Street, and we're gonna move through eastbound on Main Street. The first thing you come to as you come out of the roundabout, your speed is already slow, and the last thing we want to do is create an environment for people to punch it. And so right here, there's a mid-block crossing. There's actually some really beautiful trees here that we want to retain. That can be a raised crossing there, so speed table. You guys have been across those, seen those before. They're designed to pass a fire truck going at speed. That's actually what we look at on the design vehicle. But it discourages cars to speed through there because they can tell there's something different here. This is the cross section of Main Street. So still retaining the parallel parking on both sides. You can see the very wide sidewalks with we call it the amenity area here, the buffer, the furnishing strip where all the plantings occur, benches, things like that. And then two 11-foot traffic lanes. Here's a view of it looking down east as we're headed kind of into town. This 3rd Street Plaza, this is obviously currently open, but when the roundabouts go in, 3rd Street doesn't really provide any function. It's very short. The queuing space is very small in there, as you guys know. And plus there's two very expensive signals that would need to be replaced. And when you go through the traffic modeling, it just doesn't make sense. 3rd Street between First and D doesn't provide a lot of functionality. And so as we started looking at it and floating the idea by the city team and said, well, what if we were to just close that? We would save the capital cost of building 2 signals and plus the perpetual cost of maintaining those signals. So in this concept, it shows Third Street turning into a plaza. And this kind of gives you a look at it here. There's Morgan's Alley in the background. This is looking eastbound on Main Street. There would be a set of bollards right here. This rendering will get updated because you obviously want to discourage people from driving through there. But it creates a really wonderful space where people could go and just kind of hang out downtown, which public places are what draw people to downtown, along with the businesses. Continuing on, also at Brackenberry Square, kind of taking the feel of that and pulling it across Main Street there. That's another way to create friction and slow people down as they drive through Main Street, because again, we're headed towards making it a comfortable place for pedestrians to be. This is 7th to 8th Street. Moving on to new 6th Street. One of the things we received during the public meetings, we had some imagery that showed a festival street, and you guys have probably been to places where there's festival streets, where the streets and the sidewalk are all at the same elevation. It's technically called a Wunderhof street, a lot of them in Germany and in Europe. And the street is very flexible to use, because when you want to close it, you put a barrier here, you put a barrier over here, and boom, it turns into a festival street, and there's no curbs to trip over it. It's very easy to have farmers markets or events down there. And that was the concept that new 6th Street could be. It's still a street, 95% of the time, but when you get ready to close it, it's pretty easy to close, and it functions very well as a multi-use type street. This is a view of 6th Street. So this is standing on the north side, looking back up New 6th Street right there. There's another view, aerial view, kind of looking right down New 6th Street. Moving on to 6th to 9th Street, the change here is the angled parking. The sidewalks are still pretty wide in this area. We went back and forth. At one point, we had the sidewalks wider, but parking was really important. The feedback we received from kind of all the folks that we talked to, the steering committee, property owners, business owners, is to keep the angled parking. This is what it looks like in 9th to 11th here. And one of the really cool features that we've been able to add, so 11th Street is right here, is the right-of-way is so wide there that we can put angled parking on both sides and a boulevard down the middle of it, a planter strip down the middle of the road. So as you're approaching the downtown, this really works as a great entrance, because you're coming in and here's these very nice trees. I'm somewhere new. I'm going to slow down and look around. All those things that you try to design into a downtown to promote businesses. This is on to D Street. The thing that oh, yes, sir.
You to interrupt you, but before you finish this one.
Yeah.
So is 11 feet, can you go to the next slide you were going to do? So is 11 feet a standard arterial lane width?
It's on the narrow side. Yep. It's
very narrow.
Yeah. It kind of depends. The one thing that you'll notice here is the parking lane width is 9 feet. So on the parking, sometimes those are 8 feet, and a little bit of it is deciding where you put that foot. In this case, we've put it into the parking aisle and not into the lane. But the idea of going to 11-foot lanes is to promote that slower traffic speed through downtown.
So when you were looking at these concepts, these widths, did they look at the impact of somebody pulling a trailer down it?
You mean like at the intersections, the turning?
Just two people pulling a trailer meeting.
That's not a typical design vehicle you would look at. Are you talking about like a highway truck?
No, a vehicle pulling a snowmobile trailer, whatever.
Yeah.
Or a camper trailer.
Yeah, in our experience, because we've done downtowns like this with 11-foot lanes, and you're right, when that happens, those folks have to slow down. because they feel uncomfortable and they kind of generally slow down. The purpose of this corridor is not primarily to move traffic. If you want to get through town, you would use the bypass, which you guys are very fortunate to have that bypass. In a lot of communities, you have this gigantic conflict between, I want to move traffic very efficiently through my main street, but I also want to slow my traffic down in Main Street to promote businesses, a business-friendly environment, and you have a conflict between the two. Lewiston's really fortunate because if you're coming through town and you're like, I just want to get to Costco, you can just take the bypass. And that doesn't exist in a lot of communities, and you guys are fortunate that way.
So are you also gonna go into space and allowance for delivery trucks and stuff?
I am, yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have just one question before we move on. Did you guys look into parking where you back in versus pulling in?
We did not.
The benefit or non-benefit?
I am a gigantic proponent of back-end parking, and I have back-end angled parking. I have yet to work in a community where we have been able to successfully implement that. Because people are so, once we float it and we talk about it, it actually got beta tested in Pullman, and people went nuts and were absolutely opposed to it. The only place we've successfully done it is on a side street in Post Falls. By the Republic Grill, if you ever go up there, it's just off of Spokane Street. You can go in there and it's on a side street. We put it in there, striped it, and the city hasn't pulled it out. What's interesting is people still will go the wrong way and head in angled park instead of back in angled park. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cross section of D Street here, the thing I'll point out to you here is this two-way bike lane. When we started working through community feedback, steering committee, this idea of creating a bicycle-friendly connection as an alternate way for folks to move through downtown really started to get traction. And when we start to talk a little bit with folks now, they kind of like the idea, but they're like, well, no one rides their bikes because Lewiston's really hilly. Well, e-bikes are changing the way people behave, because people that normally wouldn't ride get on an e-bike and they're going up and down hills and they're riding for miles. And so this idea got a lot of traction. You can see it here in this color here. It's on the north side, and there's enough width in there to retain parallel parking, plus put in the two-way bike path, plus have amenity zones and a pedestrian corridor. And so that would connect between First here and over to Fifth Street. You can see here. Here's Fifth Street, and you guys are aware of the shared use path that comes right here. You'll kind of notice that the patterning stops right here for the shared use path and goes to kind of sidewalk patterning. That's something we're still working through it. It probably wouldn't, I don't know that it'll get worked out until we actually get into final design, because it's kind of a complicated confluence of uses there when you have potential bikes and peds running into each other right there. Any questions on the street geometry or whatnot before I move on to bus stops and loading and unloading? Okay, I'm almost done, Mayor. Bus stops, we've been working with transit and we've got the bus stops identified. One of the things we did do is we're putting in very big bus stops. Your current bus design vehicle is a short vehicle, but your future bus is potentially bigger. So we're concepting in bigger bus stops. Loading is a challenge for the businesses. So doing loading zones using time restricted parking, because you don't want to burn up good old parking spaces for loading. So you time restrict the loading, which requires the businesses to coordinate with their deliveries. Those spots show the locations, the proposed locations. When you take the bus stops and you take those out for parking, here's how, in addition to the changes that I've shown you here, here's kind of the parking counts, the way that they change by block. But the total gain is about 4 spaces at this point. One of the things I will tell you is the configurations of transitioning from the bulbs at the intersections back into parking spots. Right now, they're very sharp and they're very hard to maintain, as you guys know. Hard to plow, hard to clean leaves out of to get the sweepers in there. When we configure those spaces like right in here, those radii are intended to make sweepers to be able to move through there very efficiently, so you're not increasing long-term maintenance costs, but you do burn up a little bit of parking. So we were pretty tickled that we were able to actually have a positive forward. Normally you end up losing spaces. That's it. The next step is our general open house on the 13th. We wanted to show you this information just in case something, resonated with you that you wanted to change this or do something different. We'll come back here on the 25th in theory, there might be a preliminary design adoption or whenever the mayor and council and Dustin and Luke decide to bring that forward. But that's the schedule we're prepared to move forward on. Glad to answer any more questions.
Councilors?
Yes, sir.
So I have another lane width question.
You bet.
So currently, how wide are the lanes in Main Street down around Fifth?
I think they're 12 and a half right now.
So it's gonna be narrower.
It's gonna be narrower.
So
yeah.
right now, when you're driving, you don't really wanna be parallel with another car. You wait and stagger because it's so tight right now.
Yeah.
So you have two full-size pickups. I'm gonna give up the trailer. The lanes are too narrow.
There's.
If a guy opens his door, all the traffic's gonna stop.
Which is again not a bad thing in a downtown. And I know it's a challenge to kind of work through what it is now and what one is accustomed to. And we can, if one of the things was we want to go to 12-foot lanes, we'll end up taking it out of the parking aisle, or we'll make the sidewalk 1 foot narrower. But the thing that we work through in downtowns is, am I trying to prioritize the vehicle and make lanes wider so people feel more comfortable so they drive faster? Or am I trying to prioritize the pedestrian? And typically in a downtown, you prioritize the pedestrian and not the vehicle, because the vehicle doesn't drive business, the pedestrian drives business. When the vehicle's going through downtown and they're going faster, they're not stopping and looking around. They're kind of making it their way through downtown. But it is absolutely a trade-off, and it's one of the things that sometimes rises to council. And council says, you know what, we're just not comfortable with 11-foot lanes. We want 12-foot lanes. And okay, we'll pull it out of the sidewalk, we'll find it and put it back in. But it's a very valid discussion to have. But those are the trade-offs.
Well, I guess a follow-up then, to me, it would be, along with it, I think you would need to have a lot of traffic regulation, and there's no trailers downtown. You limit the trucks, you put those box trucks coming in there and trying to unload, them trying to fit in a 9-foot spot, I don't know. Their unloading spot's gotta be bigger. The traffic has to slow down to about 10 miles an hour, to be traffic regulations to put up with those 11-foot lanes.
All the things you're saying are completely valid, and it is the desired trade-off, because in some communities we work in this discussion, the conclusion will be put them as 12-foot lanes and leave the parking aisles at 9-foot width. And that's what ends up happening, and you pull it out of the sidewalk. In other communities, they say, you know what, we want traffic slow. The delivery trucks are just gonna have to be a little more sophisticated, because in other communities, they do it, and it's just what works for Lewiston is the conclusion. And we're not at the point where you necessarily have to decide tonight, or even in the next 3 or 4 months or 6 months. When we get the final design, and we're really getting after it, is when the conclusion would be made. But you're drawing a bead on an important topic that gets discussed.
I just have one question. I can't really tell if we have a plan for the vaults or an idea of what we're planning to do with them.
We do. So we've spent a fair amount of time identifying vaults that are in use and not in use, essentially the two categories. The plan that we're putting together, and without an exhibit, I'll just show you here in a cross-section very quickly, because I know the mayor's staring at me. If there were a vault, let's say right outside this building face right here, if you do not tear up the street and you have to go fill that vault in, it's a very challenging thing, as Dustin and Luke know, because they just dealt with one here recently, very expensive, because you're doing it with concrete and things like that. When you tear up the whole street, the vault is there in front of you, and you're able to pull off the street side face of the vault. And you can pull off the sides of it, and then you can actually fill it in with structural soils. So it's much more cost effective. So part of what we're doing is we're going through and estimating the cost to remove to fill in the unused vaults. And we have that number in our cost estimate, so then the council can start to think about how to set a policy around that. Because they are an encroachment in your right of way. But are you really responsible to fill them in? That's a decision that rises to this level. What we intend to do is just show you the cost of it and to help you work through a policy on it.
Yeah, I guess I'll just say my 2 cents on that. I really think it would be best if we try to save the vaults as much as we can. Obviously, we still have to think about cost effectiveness. I mean, we don't want to dig ourselves into a hole, just for keeping a vault, but to keep the historical downtown and the beauty of that, if we could work on trying to keep the vaults as much as possible, I think would be beneficial.
So just a follow-up on that is even if we abandon the vault, what we intended to do is the glass blocks that are in there is to replicate those in the sidewalk. So they can the vault may not exist underneath, but you still see the glass block as a remembrance of where the vault was. There's ones you can get now that are solar lit, and they actually have light underneath them. If you've been to Seattle, you might have seen them there on the waterfront. So that would be the way we would retain the historical significance of it without having the economic burden of having that encroachment in the city's right of way.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So on a positive note, I really like that 3rd Street Plaza idea and I think it was 6th Street, the Festival Street. I think that'd be an awesome idea.
Good, thank you. Yeah, and that's feedback, just, so you guys, we show a lot of pictures to begin with, because we don't want to be presumptuous about presenting ideas to your community, so we just show pictures. And when people start to gravitate towards it, they're like, now explain this to me. And you explain it, and they start to see the vision of it. They put stickers on that one, and then that's where this came from. It's just feedback from your community. Great.
Thank you.
Very
Very
good.
much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Council, next up, we have Norman Hill Cemetery Master Plan update, an update on the progress of the Norman Hill Cemetery Master Plan and Community Input Cemetery and Urban Forestry Commission Chair, Shirley Phillips, and Public Information Officer, Carol Maurer. This is an action item. Carol, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So in your packet for today's work session, you received a document that shows the results of a survey that was conducted from late September to mid-October. So I don't have any visuals, so I figured I'd kind of walk through that briefly and then invite our commission chair up here to speak with all of you. So in the document that you received, there's a brief history on the Normal Hill Cemetery, and then a brief recap of City Council direction. So for everyone in the room and those watching, at the August 5th work session, the mayor and council emphasized the need for a sustainable plan and agreed to receive a progress update from the Cemetery and Urban Forestry Commission at this meeting that we're here at today. To fulfill this initiative, the commission launched a survey to obtain public feedback in order to build a memo to bring to you today. And so staff helped the commission facilitate that. So overall, I guess I'll say, so the survey was distributed through the platforms available to us. And that includes our utility bills, which if you looked over that document, that it was where we received the most responses, as well as an online survey. And so that was available on all of our platforms. In total, there were 796 responses. I broke those out so that you could see, in terms of numbers, which responses came from utility bills and which responses were through the online survey as well. And as you can see, it was option 2 that appeared to be the favored in the responses for both utility bills and online responses. And so this information is available on the website in the City Council packet. But now that the Commission has received this information and the City Council has received this information, by tomorrow morning we'll have it available for the public through all of our other platforms, just so you know. So unless you have any questions for me about the survey, how it was distributed, next up will be Shirley Phillips, our Commission Chair.
Councilor Forsman?
We're, the chair, gonna go through the statistics of like who wanted more of option 1, 2, or was that something I should ask you?
She can, but I'm here now, so I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
If I'm reading this right, the majority wanted option 2.
Correct.
That's the high routes, okay.
And there were 200 out of the 796 who selected option 2 through utility bill responses, 174 from online. So a total of 374 selected option 2. So the majority.
I want to make sure I read that correctly.
Yeah, you bet. And the second most popular option in responses was option 1. There were only 3 options, so number 3. Number 3. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carol. Shirley, please introduce yourself for the record. Remember to speak up clearly and loudly so those, especially our counselors listening at home, can hear what you have to say. Thank you.
I'll do my best. Thank you. Shirley Phillips, Chair of the Urban Forestry and Cemetery Commission. I want to thank Carol for the wonderful job she did in putting together the survey. She did it on a very short timeline, got tabulated all the results, and we really appreciate her work on that. At the August 5th City Council work session, the Urban Forestry and Cemetery Commission, was questioned about the status of the Norman Hills Cemetery Master Plan and asked for an update. At that time, the council was looking at several city-owned properties to be surplused for potential future sale. The undeveloped land on the south side of the cemetery was one of those properties being considered. As the council is aware, the city made a serious investment in 2014 by hiring a professional consulting firm to draft a comprehensive master plan for the entire cemetery, which included that undeveloped property. At that time, it was recognized that the current cemetery, which is the only city cemetery, was running out of space. Work developing that plan took almost a year. It involved public outreach as well as input from city staff and the commission members. The master plan was adopted by council in 2015. The plan laid out phases for development, and the commission was excited to begin the baby steps of implementing the plan and showing the citizens of Lewiston that something new and exciting was happening. Each year, requests to fund projects were made during the budget meetings. We brought modest proposals like establishing water lines, planting trees, and small ones, letting them mature while other elements of the plan were put in place. And each year, those requests were denied. Now we're here in 2024, and we have a new council, and I bring these points up because I want to be clear that the commission members were doing their job. The lack of implementation of the plan wasn't that we were neglecting our duties, but simply that the funds just weren't there. That's enough looking backwards. Now we look forward. Let's concentrate on excitement and pride at the jewel that we have in the heart of our city, the historic Normal Hill Cemetery. At the commission meeting that was held last week on October 30th, the recommendation to bring to council from the commission was voted on, and the final recommendation to this city council is not to sell any portion of the historic Normal Hill Cemetery. As I told my fellow commission members, the mayor had asked to come back with a compromise. And I firmly believe in compromise. And I think that often with compromise, you come out with something stronger than you went into with. But in this particular instance, I just don't find that to be the case. The historic site is not only the resting place for our community loved ones, but also a significant cultural landmark that reflects the city's rich heritage. Once that land is sold, it's gone forever, cheating future generations out of a final resting place on Normal Hill. In saying no to the sale, the commission isn't proposing the status quo. We have some updates and future proposals that involve continued investment into the cemetery and following the path laid out in that master plan. Let's begin by creating a 5-year plan to implement the master plan, utilizing the entire property. Creating a 5-year plan, 2025 to 2029, would help organize and prioritize tasks and allow the commission, city staff, and the Lewiston City Council to work hand in hand to implement the plan. The commission understands the concern of the council regarding the sustainability of the cemetery. Although the commission does not necessarily agree that the cemetery should be self-sustaining like an enterprise fund, we agree that it will take investment in order to continue generating revenues and to grow the perpetual care fund, which we didn't get a report on today, but I'm sure that will be a follow-up. The cemetery has been in existence since 1888 and has been supported by the city for over 130 years. As I stated earlier, the current cemetery is running out of space. The trend is more people are choosing cremation over full casket burials. There are currently very few options remaining in the mausoleum. An element of the original plan was to establish a garden-type area in front of the current mausoleum that would include 4 columbarium, along with ossuary and scattering gardens. Funds were allocated several years ago for the purchase of the first columbarium to begin the project. Then COVID hit, and the prices increased dramatically for columbarium, and so the project was put on hold. Fiscal year 2025, council members have funded that first step of the project, and I thank you. Once the ground is prepped and completed, which all of that ground prep work can be done in-house, I'm told, the first columbarium can be installed. It will have 156 niches, and each of those can accommodate up to 2 cremations. This will give the cemetery inventory to generate funds to go toward the purchase of the next columbarium. This would give the cemetery project, this particular project, with 156 niches in this first one, and with a goal of a total of 4, would generate approximate revenue $620,000. And even more for ossuary space that would be included. While this project is being completed, the commission will be working with the city staff to update the master plan with more current statistics, estimates, and updated financial plan. At the end of fiscal year 24, the Perpetual Care Fund had about $1,126,285 in funds. That Perpetual Care Fund averages about $69,000 annually in earnings, and that fluctuates, as you were told earlier, with the market. The operating expenses of Normal Hill Cemetery budgeted for the coming 25 years is $262,670. The current undeveloped property, as counselors have pointed out, has become a dumping ground. And if I were to guess, I would say that was why, or a contributing factor in the decision to look at that as potential sale. Addressing these issues would make a dramatic difference in the public perception of the property and the entire cemetery. The piles of dirt can be graded and begin to shape that hillside. The smelly street sweepings that back up to residential properties need to be relocated. Two possible alternate locations have been suggested. One is the city-owned property on 23rd Street. The other location is between the police training center and the water transmission on 16th Avenue. The leveling and grading, as I said before, can be done in-house, and it would be a wonderful start. The water source that was lacking in 2015 is now on site, and for under $5,000, temporary irrigation can be installed to place new trees as funded. Next on the 5-year timeline would be to upgrade the main line for divisions 4 and 5. And those are the two divisions that are currently developed, but just south of 15th Avenue. The cost of putting in permanent irrigation, it would total about 7 acres because of that divisions 4 and 5, and the 6.2 acres would cost about $32,000. With that, grass could be planted and the hillside could be kept green and attractive. Grants for cemeteries are limited, but there are some available that could make a significant impact. Most cemetery grants typically focus on veteran cemeteries, but there are additional ones that are specifically designed not only for cemeteries, but for public parks and public spaces, and they could yield further funding opportunities. These grants often support environmental enhancements, community engagement initiatives, and infrastructure improvements. These could benefit our cemetery grounds as well. By actively pursuing these diverse funding sources, we can not only safeguard the historical integrity of our cemetery, but also enhance the role of the valued community resource. The Commission welcomes the opportunity to work with the city grant writer to explore these options. I realize I've taken a great deal of your time, but this is a very important issue. It's important that the council has all of the information possible before making their decision. The Urban Forestry and Cemetery Commission strongly urges the council to reconsider keeping the entire property intact instead of selling part of it, and focus on implementing the master plan. This plan outlines essential improvements, preservation efforts, and would enhance the cemetery's accessibility, aesthetics, and overall maintenance. By prioritizing these initiatives, we can honor the memory of those interned there while ensuring that the cemetery continues to serve as a peaceful sanctuary for future generations. The value of each is commitment extends beyond the cemetery itself. It enriches the entire community, and it's preserving a vital place of our shared history. I welcome any commission questions.
Thank you, Shirley. I had a bottle of water for you. I know different.
Well, I hope nobody wants to use
No, leave it there. We'll figure it out. Thank you.
Yes.
Councillor Lidke.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, and it may be for the chair or whoever wrote the report that's in our packet. I'm trying to figure out some of these numbers. There's really no there's no stated reference to where some of these numbers came from, and just in reference. So what I'm trying to figure out is under option 2, it discusses potential revenue from developed ranges from 6.4 million to 18.6, and then a revenue loss of 1.2 million to 3.6. Can somebody clarify where that information came from, and can we cite those references so that I know where I'm getting my information from?
Thank you, Councillor. Carol, please introduce yourself for the record before responding.
Thank you. Carol Maurer, Public Information Officer for the city. I wish I could tell you exactly where that information came from. Staff and Parks and Rec provided that information. So I'm not certain if it came from the master plan or where. I'd be happy to obtain that figure out where that came from and provide that to you.
Yeah, follow up, Mayor. Yeah, because when we're making these decisions, and again, I've heard the moral argument, although I feel like 2.2 acres that we've been discussed is really to boost and create a buffer between what I believe can still be a very beautiful cemetery and a very busy arterial street. But some of the things, and I read the monthly staff updates, and I'm trying to also understand, it says in here that we have 200, I believe, available spots, and that's only going to last 3 to 5 years. So when I read available, does that mean we have not sold them yet? Because if so, based on just recent numbers, I think that extends us out farther than 3 to 5 years. And then I'm just trying to figure out the numbers and where we're getting that information, because it seems like there's just a lot of numbers with no citing of where that came from. And so it's hard for me to make that argument, if that makes sense.
Councillor, I'm looking around the room, and I don't see anyone in the room that would be able to answer that question for you unless Shirley gives me a nod that she can.
Well, I don't know that I can answer the question in very much detail, but several years ago we had a part-time staff member working out of the cemetery office and focusing on the cemetery. And at that time, she was going back and looking at the historical records of purchased grave sites that still remained vacant. And that was part of the buyback program that I think has been brought up to council in the past. So that 200 is part of that, and it's also partly unsold. And 200 is a very limited number for a cemetery in a city that it has a high percentage of retired and aging population.
Final follow-up and just a comment. I agree. But that's where I need some hard numbers because in my mind, 200 is not a lot. But based off of recent numbers, we're not selling spaces at an astronomical rate. So I need to understand if our numbers are incorrect or if they're on point. And I think we should know that if we're having a transaction of any kind in the city, there should be record of it that we should be able to track. But my concern is that I would like to move this project ahead at a quicker response so that we aren't questioning whether or not we can service people. And that was the reason why this particular solution, option number 1, was appealing to me, was that we were not taking and destroying a piece of property, but really building so that we could accentuate and finish it off so that we could serve as many people of our taxpayers as possible. So that's where my position comes from. But also now I am concerned because I'd like to have the data in front of me, but having a report that has no citations of where this information came from gives me heartburn at best to be able to say how I would like to proceed, because maybe we need to act faster than we can. And I don't know that we're at the luxury of baby steps anymore. We really do need to start taking care of, and you mentioned our population that's 65 and older. I want to serve them. That's why I did this. So do we need to act in accordance with the need that is there? Now I'm even more uncertain based off the inability to answer these questions based on the data that's in this report. So I would love some more follow-up and to continue this conversation, because I do think that it's an asset to our city. And it is a very beautiful area with some blighted areas surrounding it that we could be fixing.
Councilor Lidke, we're going through some changes right now. And so what I will commit to is I will contact some folks within the city and see if we can't get you some hard numbers, some better numbers, and I'll share them with Shirley and others, and they can confirm the numbers, and we can take a look at that, and then maybe we can, have some kind of informal discussion. But I don't think we're going to get that information tonight. It doesn't appear. But thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Go ahead. Yes, and as I stated, that all those numbers came from staff. I'm not sure which staff within the Parks and Recreation Department, but I'm happy to help in any way that I can.
And I think Commissioner Lidke's comment about the revenue generated from the cemetery, like over the past year, we see those reports at our commission meetings. And when there have been 3 internments or 1 internment, that's pathetic. But if you don't, it's like if you had a store and you don't have inventory, you can't have sales numbers go up. And I think that with the installation of the columbarium and giving the citizens the option to purchase the niches for cremations, we are going to see an increase in revenue. So I know that only partially answers the question.
Thank you. Councilor Forsman?
Hi. Are you aware of how many times since the cemetery master plan kind of got put into place did the commission present to council?
For
Yearly?
purchases?
Yeah.
Yearly. It was
yearly?
It really was. I know that the first 5 years, it was like every time we had an opportunity. After that, it may have been every other year, but it's always been a topic at the time of budget with a specific project, not just give money.
Right, yeah, I understand. Okay, I was just asking because I think if we were gonna make this serious and stay with the master plan, I think it's important that we bring it up yearly as more again, or if we stop doing that, I think we need to start doing it again. And also to make sure we're bringing up market values and that we're staying competitive so we can still bring money to the cemeteries so that they're getting funds. And it seems that there might have been a lacking in that, and I could be speaking incorrectly, but it seems like we haven't been really putting this on the radar. And I think if we're gonna take action, we need to have this on the radar.
Exactly. And we have done research on cemeteries within our immediate area as far as to south to Boise and
Just
north
recently.
to Coeur d'Alene. And we are right in line. In fact, there are a few areas where we are a little bit more greater in fees than they are. And that is something that I felt that has been moved to be addressed annually with a percentage increase, but I may be misspoken.
Counselor, could I ask you to submit those questions to the Cemetery Commission and CC at least my office, if not the city clerk, so that I can distribute them to all the other council members, because I think it's important and I don't want to lose this. So, and Shirley doesn't have a pen with her, so she's not writing this down, but I want to make sure she gets your questions, and then I can work with her and others and try to get those questions answered.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilor Spickmeyer?
With my question, I can do the same, so.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor. Yeah, I think, folks, Shirley is our counselors. Shirley's working hard to put this all together for us. And so we're probably gonna have to help out a little bit, but I think one way we can help out is if we just share our questions or send them to the city clerk, maybe is the best way to do that. And then I'll ask her if she can distribute those back to the council, blind copy you, so we know what questions we're sending to Shirley and the Cemetery Commission, so that, everybody is kind of singing from the same song sheet.
And with specifics, so that we.
Yeah, specifically, and then I can work with you and staff to try to get answers to the council's questions, because they're important questions, and we want to get this right, so.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Lidke?
I just want to really quick thank Shirley and the commission. I want to make very clear that I am aware of the efforts that you guys have made. Being in the city has shown us that the process seems a little backward sometimes, that we're always trying to play catch up and that you don't get your voice at the table as much as you probably need it to be. So please know that I understand that and am really wanting to work to a solution that works the best for this to have longevity and serve as many people as we can. So thank you again. And please know that I've taken a lot of notes and I will get you those detailed questions.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. If there's no closing comments, we'll let Shirley go. You did a good job. Thank you, and everyone for being here tonight. We appreciate that very much.
Thank you, Shirley.
Council, next up is item D, shipping containers, discussion items. A review of proposed amendments to Lewiston City Code sections 37-129, 37-3 regarding shipping containers, presented by Community Development Director Shannon Grove. Shannon, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. So this topic has been before you before. We got to the second and third reading, and that's when we kind of took a timeout. So just as a reminder, this process kind of started in June. There was a a citizen that came to the council and was concerned that one of his neighbors had a shipping container. Staff looked into that and found that there are many shipping containers within the city. This has been in the code since 1994, I believe. 94, so it's been a long time. Staff did research and found that, looked at what do other Idaho cities do, and it was found that Post Falls, Moscow, Boise, Kuna, and Ammon, as well as some nearby cities in Washington, including Clarkson and Pullman, do allow shipping containers within their cities. So staff came to the council and said, we're kind of at a fork in the road. They are not allowed in the code right now. We can go and do enforcement and probably come to you about a strategy to do so because there are so many within the city. Our code enforcement officer went around and took pictures of those in all zones and estimated in the 200s of how many shipping containers there currently are. And I just want to make it clear that this was not an attempt on staff to say, oh, we don't want to deal with this. It was more of a bring it to policymakers to say, we haven't had this barrage of folks coming to us complaining about these, so weren't sure what the temperature of the community was. And so we brought this to you to say, do you want us to write these, to amend the code to allow them, put some sideboards on them, or do you want us to go and do enforcement on them? So staff was directed to go ahead and write code to allow for shipping containers. And in June, that was brought before the Planning and Zoning Commission. They recommended to move forward with the changes to the zoning code to allow them. And that was brought to you then in August. So on August 12th, you heard the ordinance for the first time that would allow these shipping containers. They would, at that time, be treated like a structure and would require a building permit. A lot of the feedback that you received at that time through letters or maybe even letters to the editor were concerns that folks did not want permit fees associated with shipping containers. So August 26th, it came back to the council for the second and third reading, and at that time, staff asked for delay to that ordinance so that we could take a look at the feedback regarding permits and fees and bring that back to you. During that interim time, staff has also received other feedback regarding Normal Hill specifically and whether or not shipping containers are appropriate for Normal Hill. There is a section in code, Lewiston section 37-131, and it's talking about accessory buildings. And in that code, accessory buildings like agricultural buildings, some of them are exempt from building permits. So they still have to maintain setbacks, as in they can't be, up to the front yard property line, and they have to, obviously fit within the side yards and rear yards as well. They are processed through community development, and I attached the form of what that might look like if you chose to do that with shipping containers. But it allows the person to kind of declare what they're using this shipping container for. If it's simply for storage, that's fine. If they want something other than that, obviously there's going to be building permits and those types of things that come along with that. At this time, there is no fee established in the fee resolution for shipping containers. That is a whole separate issue that comes before this body. We do building permits, business licensing, essentially all the fees in the city come at the same time. So like I said, we've received feedback that about shipping containers and whether or not they're appropriate for the Normal Hill zones. You heard from citizens today that said they would not like to see shipping containers allowed at all. We're really kind of at that point now where we're wanting to get feedback from the council of what direction you'd like to go now that you've received more testimony from the public. And the staff will write code accordingly.
Thank you, Director. Councilor Forsman.
Do we know, and I don't know if we don't have that information, how we can get it, but it'd be nice to get that information, but do we know how well Moscow and those other comparable cities, how their code is written? Are we gonna be close to that code, or are they having issues with the following code with having shipping containers?
I believe when Planner Plascon looked into it, there was no indication that there were issues with them. He was asking if they were allowed, and they said they were. I suppose we could do follow-up. Did you get any feedback of the sort? You'd have to come up here.
Welcome, Joel. Please introduce yourself. Thank you.
Joel Plascon, Lewiston City Planner. My understanding is they don't have codes about them. They just simply are silent on them, and they treat them as buildings through the building code.
Through the building code, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Councilor Spickelmeyer?
So I didn't hear that really. So you said you think they're treating them as building with building codes?
Correct. Okay. And that's what the proposal that we brought to you was.
The original proposal.
The original one.
Yep.
Right, follow up.
Counselor Forsman?
Is there a way to, maybe have restrictions on just like big metal shipping containers and then different, because maybe that's different for like sheds versus shipping, because the shed, like some of those sheds are like nicer and they have siding, whereas shipping container, the way I'm visualizing, is just a metal shipping container.
I mean, certainly you can talk about aesthetics if you'd like to. I will tell you that our code enforcement officer came upon one that he thought was a shipping container. It was actually a shed. And so it looked very much like a shipping container. It is difficult to regulate that. You heard from a developer last week, talking about small lot development, and what he's talking about are aesthetics.
Mm-hmm.
These are difficult to enforce, and they're, I guess, difficult for some to maintain throughout the code and when they're building them. But I guess, long story short, the answer is you can. Yes.
But maybe not as effective.
Yeah.
I understand, thank you.
Yep.
Counselor Spickelmeyer?
Thank you. So I guess for me, I agree with a lot of the public comment is, I don't want my neighbors having a shipping container in the front yard. If we're gonna have them, I would support that issue they were gonna put forward for Normal Hill, to where they had to be, whatever they call it, the type of building couldn't be out in front of the house, or I can't remember how they explained it, but if you have no regulation, they'll put them anywhere, and it's gonna kill, the property values, and it shouldn't impact your neighbor what you're gonna do with your property.
Yeah, so currently they would not be allowed in the setbacks anywhere. So most front yard setbacks are 20 feet in residential zones, so they would not be allowed in those zones regardless. You could in Normal Hill, you can either, the reason why I gave that kind of example within my memo about Normal Hill was that there are some restrictions for all accessory structures in Normal Hill already. But as you can see with number 1, on those exceptions, that you would be allowed to put one in the front if the lot was less than 50 feet and there's no abutting alley. So you can do it, and they would not be allowed in the front yard setbacks right now, but certainly it's something for you to consider.
Follow up?
Counselor Spickelmeyer?
So in the last discussions we had, there was some talk about changing the regulation due to the size of the container. Like if it was under 200 square feet, you wouldn't have to have certain things.
Yeah, so
most of them are that big.
Any structure currently, if it's under 200 square feet, it does not require a building permit. It still should not be within the setbacks of a lot. So that's probably what you're thinking of. Yeah. Yeah, we've really heard the full spectrum on these. It goes from we don't want them at all to we want them and we don't want you to charge us a building permit fee for them. So it's really wide spectrum on the comments we've gotten on these shipping containers.
Counselor Forsman?
Have you seen codes where it's more allowant to, commercial, like construction sites or temporary buildings, so they can have it for temporary storage as their building for their commercial building, businesses kind of thing, so business central versus?
Currently in the industrial zone, so in the current code, they are allowed temporarily in the industrial zones.
Mm-hmm.
So
But we're
yes.
getting them in residential, right?
We have them in all zones.
Right, in all zones.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Schroeder?
Thank you. Currently, we don't have anything in code that says any building we put on our property has to be aesthetically beautiful, right?
The small lot development would be a different, yeah, there is some, but not generally. Yeah.
I was trying to remember, I didn't think there was.
Yeah, I mean, we've had folks that say, well, what if you required that they're painted the same color as the house, and those types of things.
I do remember that.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
so folks have approached it like that. Again, those are kind of difficult decisions. We don't really regulate that. You do have CCNRs in some neighborhoods that would regulate those types of things, but citywide, there's not a lot out there.
And may I follow up there?
Mr. Schroeder?
Thank you. So even in the Normal Hill, north and south, they are not really allowed unless unless they meet 1 and 2.
So they're not allowed at all. Currently, shipping containers are not allowed, period. But what this is talking about is accessory buildings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so would accessory buildings provide that they could put shipping containers in there? I mean, are we talking that shipping containers are an accessory building?
If you treated them as an accessory building, yes. So this was just to point out that there are some regulations in Normal Hill already for accessory type buildings.
I see, okay. Yeah. And we really haven't classified them as that?
No.
Okay.
I think you're really at the point of, do you want to allow them or do you not want to allow them? And if you do want to allow them in commercial and industrial zones, but not any residential zones, that's fine. Do you want to allow them in the orchard zones, which we don't really have orchard zones in Normal Hill, but we do have Normal Hill. We know where that is. Do you want to not have them allowed in Normal Hill zones? So those are the kinds of things that you would direct staff to do.
So we could do all of those options, any one of those options?
Sure.
Thank you.
One last question, then I'm done.
Councilor Forsman?
In the code that we're trying to write, not currently, you're trying to write, if they tried to put electrical or plumbing, anything in like that, then that now goes under like a building permit.
Correct.
Which would be in violation of what the code that we're trying to, the code we're thinking about currently.
If you were to allow shipping containers and not require a building permit, then you would put the sideboards on it for the use. And then if somebody wanted to turn a shipping container into a property, a livable space, then that would come along with a whole lot of permits, building permits, electrical permits, those types of things, foundations.
And if someone wanted to do that, if it's not in code, we could still deny that as being an option, not allowing shipping containers to become a living facility.
Possibly.
Thank you.
Councilors, again, this is a review of proposed amendments to Lewiston City Code Sections 37-129, 37-3 regarding shipping containers as presented by Community Development Director Shannon Grow. And so the director is trying to point out, if you're prepared tonight to make some decisions on whether or not to allow these shipping containers anywhere in the city of Lewiston within the so-called orchard zones or the Normal Hill zones, or they're more appropriate one part of town and not the other, and if so, at a later date, whether there would be a permit or a fee for these things, those are the decisions that you would be making.
Mayor?
Councilor Klein?
So I was wondering, so with Normal Hill, the reason people would be able to put shipping containers in their front yard is because of the lot size, correct?
No, shipping containers are not allowed in Normal Hill. Accessory buildings, in that memo, it's talking about how accessory buildings could be allowed under those exemptions.
Okay. So if they were allowed in Normal Hill, people would be able to put them in their front yard if they had a small lot, correct?
If the council wanted to allow shipping containers to be, to follow the same kind of regulation that accessory building, then yes.
Is there any way to modify that to just not allow accessory buildings in Normal Hill in your front yard?
Sure. That would be a different ordinance that we would have to write if that's something that you'd want us to do. That also would have to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission because that's not something that they considered.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Schroeder?
So you were wanting us tonight to go ahead and start creating our thoughts for approving or not approving the containers.
Counselor, I'm going to ask for, I'm going to phone a friend here and ask Director Grow. Earlier, she made a comment about second and third readings on this. So could you please just clarify that before I answer that question?
Absolutely. So we originally brought ordinance 4921 to you. And that first reading was taking accessory buildings and treating them as a structure. And so at that time, the conversation was more around, oh, well, that would require a building permit. We don't want to require a building permit. We don't want these fees. The topic was more about that. Staff then brought it back and said, well, why require a shipping container to have a building permit if it's just for storage anyway, because you're not really looking at a structure of this. This is a prefabbed type thing that doesn't require those types of things. And so if you're just doing it for storage, why don't we propose doing this ag building exemption for shipping containers as well? Then there has been feedback, as you got today, saying, we really want you to rethink this. We don't want you to allow shipping containers at all. And so you're really saying, well, do we want to consider even allowing them in residential zones? Do we want to do the commercial? The first ordinance that you had us consider was to allow them. And so we're just kind of going through the process here. And so we don't necessarily need a direction tonight. If you want to consider it further, you can do that. We can bring you other things that you'd like to see from us. We're just looking at where do you want us to go with this now?
Counselor, did you have a follow-up then? I didn't answer your question, but I phoned a friend and that's my answer.
Thank you, and I appreciate it. And, I'm kind of just stuck on it tonight, because yes, we did want you to go ahead and do this, and yet I'm thinking, is there, could we be provided with a map as to show us where the, not as small, where the areas would be that if it was industrial?
It's your zoning map, so yes.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Right,
that'd be a zoning map.
And then the Normal Hill North and South are considered the same, correct?
There would also be on the zoning map.
Yeah, but they are considered the same codes within the two.
No, I don't think so. South would have different.
That's what I was thinking, that the South has different codes than North
You
does.
just have one.
As I remember, we did that, so
They're delineated separately on the map.
yes,
Yeah.
okay. So, I think there's a lot of things that we hadn't thought about that we should be thinking about, and possibly maybe we should get a little more information and postpone that from tonight. So that's my thought.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Spickelmeyer?
Thank you. So I guess a follow-up to the comments is that we could regulate it by zone then as well.
Yep, you could. Yeah, I guess that's what I was getting at. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Counselor Forsman?
Final comment. I'm not prepared to make a decision, and I'm not putting it totally off the table either. I just think that we can't, until we really understand a code that would make sense so that we don't have just people putting them up at their houses, and what exactly does that look like, and sizes. I'm not really ready to make that decision, so I think it needs more attention and care before we say, yep, that's what we're doing, is my opinion.
City Planner Plaskon?
Thank you. Just an observation about the consideration of doing it by zoning district. That can get very convoluted because we don't just have residential zones, commercial zones, and industrial zones. We also have mixed use zones where both residential and commercial are allowed in the same zone. We also have situations where there are residential uses in commercial zones. So it can get kind of hairy.
Not so black and white.
Thank you for that, yes.
Mayor?
Counselor Klein?
I just wanted to be clear of where I stand. I believe people should be able to have shipping containers as long as they're not affecting other people. They're in their backyard, that's fine. If they're in their front yard, I would say that's starting to affect your neighborhood.
Thank you, Counselor, for that clarification. Counselors, if you don't take action on it tonight, then we're just going to move on to Roman numeral 5, unfinished business. So I'll just delay a second here, see if the counselor has anything to contribute.
Do we need, or should we ask to bring it back at a future meeting to go over zoning or over the code more in detail? Just trying to think of, so we're not becoming stagnant.
I think we have agenda topics at the end, but I think we're going to do that anyway because we're trying to get this resolved.
Okay.
So
Then, yeah.
I'm happy to bring that back and do some more work on it. Sounds like we just have a few questions out there and I'll try to get them answered for you.
Okay, thank you.
If that works.
Sure.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Joel, for being here.
Thank you.
Councilors, next we'll move to Roman numeral 5, unfinished and new business. Item A, city councilor comments. Comments shall not be related to an item currently before the council or an item that may come before the council in the foreseeable future and shall be limited to comments, not discussions.
Yep. Of course.
Councilor Forsman.
Why are you looking at me like I always got it? Tomorrow is election day. And just as a reminder, it also is Veterans Day on Monday, this coming Monday. And so with that, I will leave with this quote. Someone struggled for your right to vote, so use it, by Susan B. Anthony. We have people that obviously fight for our rights to do that, and it's important that we vote and our voices is heard. So I encourage you to get out there and vote so that your opinions are heard, as well as thank a veteran for putting their life on hold so that they can serve their country and those that they care about. My husband's a veteran, and although he doesn't like to be thanked because he's weird, but I do thank him anyway. So if you have veterans in your family or you know a veteran, please thank them for their sacrifice. I have nothing further.
Thank you, Counselor. We know his father too. Okay.
That speaks for itself.
Yeah. Counselor Spickmeyer, he's a good man. Counselor Spickmeyer.
Yeah, just a follow-up to the comment, the Veterans Day Parade, I believe, is Saturday.
Yes.
And I think they're celebrating the female veterans in the parade.
It's 11:11. The time?
The time is 11:11.
11:11, that's what I thought. So be there if you want to see it, 11:11.
Thank you, Counselors, both. Yes, we appreciate our servicemen and women who service in uniform. Any other council comments? Okay, Mayor comments, item C. First thing here, we still have Captain Clone in the back, and they've got an awesome vehicle they want to show off down LPD. It'll be there till around 6 o'clock. If you have a chance on your way home to go look at the Bearcat.
Yes, sir, the briefing got moved to like 6, so it just got there. So if anybody, city council wants to swing by the PD on their way home, we'll let you in the gate. You can take a look at it, kind of let you know what we kind of are looking at for future rather large purchase for the department, but you can get a good hands-on look at what we're looking at. So I encourage you to come by the PD.
Thank you, Counselor.
Would that be to replace the armored truck now?
I think it's on the wish list, Counselor, and if I'm free to say, the FBI's in town, and so it's their vehicle, and it's just parked over there right now, and if you want to catch a glance of what one of these Bearcats look like, this is an opportunity, so.
Just want to make sure it was understood that that's not ours or.
We're just riding on their coattails there.
Not yet.
The perpetual care fund handouts, we are going to get those to all the counselors, and I apologize that I missed that. And then lastly, we're getting close to when we're going to have open houses on our transportation capital plan, so that's an opportunity for all of us to go to those, but also get the public out so we can talk about this and start ranking what we think is important for the city of Lewiston. We do this annually, and then council gets to vote on this. So if you want to move some things around on that list, you can, but it's important to start planning ahead for that. Item D, agenda topics, anything to go with tonight? No? Okay, Roman numeral 6, adjournment.
Mayor, making a motion to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor Forsman, second by Council President Kleber to adjourn. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We stand adjourned. Thank you, council.